The early morning mist curled through the towering pines, weaving ghost-like tendrils across the rugged trails of Clearwater National Park. It was the kind of untouched wilderness few dared to enter, a raw, breathing world where the laws of nature ruled without mercy. To Daniel Carter, it was paradise. As he adjusted the heavy strap of his camera bag over his shoulder, his boots crunching softly against the frost-kissed earth. The park had a reputation for rare wildlife sightings: wolves, elk, and most famously, the elusive mountain bears. Capturing those moments was more than a job for Daniel. It was a calling. He had dreamed of photographing bear cubs in the wild for years, envisioning the perfect shot, pure, untamed innocence preserved forever in a single frame. 3 days of hiking, camping, and waiting had yielded little more than fleeting glimpses and distant growls. His body ached from sleeping on rocky ground, and the bitter cold gnawed at his resolve. But Daniel was stubborn, and hope, like a stubborn ember, burned brightly within him. Today felt different. The sun was just starting to pierce through the dense canopy, bathing the forest floor in broken shards of golden light. Moving slowly, he followed the muddy banks of a creek, careful not to disturb the natural symphony around him. The chatter of unseen birds, the whisper of the wind through trembling leaves, the babble of water over stones. Then he saw them. 2 bear cubs, tiny, clumsy, impossibly adorable, tumbled together near the water's edge, paws swiping playfully, their soft growls and squeaks carrying faintly through the cool air. They wrestled and rolled, oblivious to the world beyond their little patch of paradise. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, reverently, he dropped to one knee behind a thick bush. His fingers, though chilled, moved with the muscle memory of years of experience, raising his camera, adjusting the focus. The lens captured every twitch of a tail, every tilt of a fuzzy ear, the shimmer of water droplets clinging to their fur. Click. The first shot was perfect. A cub mid-leap, paws outstretched like a miniature warrior. Click, click. Another captured a cub sprawled on its back, mouth open in a wide, laughing pant. Daniel's heart raced, not with fear, but with exhilaration. He was invisible, a silent observer witnessing a secret moment few humans ever glimpsed. The forest around him thrummed with life. Birds flitted between branches, their calls forming a complex, chaotic melody. The breeze carried the fresh, earthy scent of damp moss and pine needles. Water splashed softly as the cubs chased each other through the shallow creek, their tiny yelps blending with the gurgle of the stream. For a moment, Daniel forgot everything. The cold, the exhaustion, the dangers, lost entirely in the magic unfolding before him. Adjusting his lens for a closer shot, Daniel inched forward, barely breathing. His fingers hovered over the shutter button, ready to immortalize the next perfect moment. But then, something shifted. The cubs stopped. Frozen mid-play, their tiny bodies rigid, ears pricked forward, their dark, beady eyes locked onto something deep within the forest, something Daniel couldn't see. The sudden stillness was jarring. The birds fell silent, as if some unseen force had smothered the sound from the air itself. The wind ceased its playful dance through the trees. Even the creek seemed to hush, its voice sinking to a murmur. A cold, prickling sensation crept up Daniel's spine. He lowered the camera slightly, peering over the bush, trying to follow the cub's gaze. The forest in that direction was a wall of tangled shadows. Thick trunks, tangled underbrush, darkness between the shafts of light. Nothing moved. Daniel smiled to himself. Probably just a deer, he thought, or maybe another bear farther off. Cubs were naturally jumpy. Still, he took the opportunity to capture a different kind of shot. The cubs alert, tense, eyes wide with instinctual fear. A powerful, storytelling image. He raised the camera again. Behind him, a twig snapped. It was so soft, so faint, it might have been the forest shifting in its sleep. But Daniel heard it. the subtle, sinister sound of something heavy disturbing the undergrowth behind his back. Still crouched, he stiffened. The logical part of his mind whispered calming thoughts. Squirrels. Maybe a rabbit. Maybe even the wind pushing a branch down. But a deeper, older part of him, the primal part buried under years of civilization, screamed a warning. Slowly, very slowly, Daniel began to pivot his head, turning to glance over his shoulder. Another crack. Louder this time. Closer. His heart thundered against his ribs, pumping adrenaline into every nerve ending. His palms were suddenly slick with sweat. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. It wouldn't do any good to panic. If it was a bear, an adult, the last thing he wanted to do was spook it by moving suddenly. He smiled again, nervously this time. Lucky day, he thought. Maybe I'll get even better shots. But Daniel was wrong. Very wrong. Because he wasn't the observer anymore. Out here, in the raw, ruthless wild, the rules were different. He was no longer the hunter behind a lens. He was prey. And something massive, something deadly, was already closing the final few feet between them. Daniel never heard the final sound before it happened. Just a sudden rush of air, the overwhelming scent of musk and earth, and the knowledge, far too late, that perfection in the wilderness always came with a price. The sharp crack of a breaking branch shattered the silence. Daniel whipped his head around and froze. Towering over him, less than 10 feet away, stood the mother bear. Her massive body rippled with muscle under a thick, shaggy coat. Her eyes, burning with primal rage, locked onto him with a terrifying intensity. Her snout wrinkled, exposing long yellowed teeth, and a low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within her chest, vibrating through the ground itself. Daniel's blood ran cold. For a split second, he forgot how to breathe, how to think. The camera dangled uselessly from his trembling hands. Every instinct screamed move, but his legs rooted themselves to the earth in paralyzing fear. It hit him then, the mistake he had made. In his pursuit of the perfect photograph, he had unknowingly crossed an invisible, sacred boundary. In the wild, proximity to a mother's young was the ultimate provocation, the one unforgivable sin. He wasn't just a stranger here. He was a threat. And the mother bear would do what every creature driven by ancient instinct would do, protect her cubs at any cost. Daniel's mind flashed with frantic memories of survival guides, online forums, whispered advice from seasoned hikers. If you see a bear, don't run. Stand your ground. Back away slowly. Make yourself look big. Heart hammering against his ribs like a frantic drum, Daniel forced his arms to rise slightly, making himself appear larger. He took one shaky step backward, eyes locked on the bear's, his voice catching in his throat as he tried to speak in soft, low tones. "It's okay," he whispered, voice quivering. "I'm leaving. I'm not here to hurt you." The bear snorted, a violent, dismissive sound, and took a heavy step forward, her massive paw flattening a cluster of ferns. Daniel's chest tightened. He took another slow step back. Another. But the bear followed, matching his retreat with grim, deliberate steps, her growl deepening into something more dangerous, a promise of violence. Then the bear reared up slightly, her claws flashing in the slivers of sunlight, her bulk casting an enormous shadow over him. Daniel's survival instincts, honed not by nature, but by centuries of human fear, exploded. He bolted. Instantly, the forest erupted into chaos. Behind him came a deafening roar, raw and furious, shaking the very leaves on the trees. Daniel crashed through the underbrush, ducking low branches, stumbling over roots, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. The bear charged after him, an unstoppable force of nature. Trees bent and snapped under her fury. The earth trembled beneath her massive weight. Daniel knew it was the worst thing he could have done. Never run from a bear. But reason had no place in moments of pure terror. His only thought now was to survive, to escape, to find something, anything, that could shield him. The forest that had once felt magical, alive with wonder, now became a nightmarish maze. Thorns ripped at his jacket, stones twisted underfoot. The idyllic babble of the creek was now a cruel soundtrack to the life-or-death chase unfolding between the ancient trees. Breath burning in his lungs, Daniel risked a glance over his shoulder. The bear was gaining. Every thunderous step brought her closer, her massive jaws snapping open and shut with terrifying force. She crashed through saplings that would have taken a man hours to hack through, her focus unbreakable. Daniel's legs pumped desperately, but exhaustion and fear were already gnawing at him. Suddenly, disaster. His boot caught on a hidden root. He pitched forward violently, crashing onto the rocky forest floor. Pain exploded up his right ankle as it twisted beneath him, and a gasp tore from his throat. His camera skidded away into the underbrush, forgotten. Panic gripped him like a vice. He scrambled to his feet, favoring the injured ankle, every step sending stabbing shocks of pain up his leg. His world narrowed to the rhythm of crashing footfalls behind him and the agonizing throb in his body. The bear was almost upon him. There, ahead, a hollow fallen tree, its trunk cracked open like a gaping mouth. Without thinking, Daniel made a desperate lunge. The bear roared again, so close now he could feel the tremor of her rage vibrating through the ground. He dove headfirst into the hollow trunk, the rough bark scraping his arms and shoulders, the opening barely wide enough to squeeze through. His jacket snagged, tearing along the sleeve, but he wriggled and pushed with everything he had, forcing himself into the dark, cramped space. Behind him, the world erupted in violence. The bear slammed into the tree with a thunderous crash, claws raking against the wood, splinters flying like shrapnel. The whole trunk shuddered under her assault. Her massive paw plunged into the opening, swiping blindly, missing him by inches. Daniel pressed himself deeper into the darkness, every muscle rigid with terror. His chest heaved and he struggled to control his breathing, desperate not to make a sound, not to draw her in further. Outside, the bear roared again, furious at being denied her prey. She circled the fallen trunk, huffing and snarling, smashing her body against it in savage frustration. Her claws scraped along the outside, gouging deep scars into the bark. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, whispering frantic prayers into the darkness. Minutes dragged into eternity. The bear didn't leave. She was waiting. A grim realization settled over Daniel like a lead weight. He wasn't safe. Not really. He was trapped. A wounded man inside a hollow tomb of wood, with an angry, relentless mother bear outside, biding her time. And in the unforgiving wilderness of Clearwater National Park, time was a weapon the bear wielded mercilessly. Inside the hollow tree, Daniel struggled to quiet his breathing. Every ragged inhale sounded deafening in the cramped darkness. His body was twisted painfully, his injured ankle throbbing in time with his pounding heart. He pressed himself against the splintery inner walls, straining his ears to track the bear's movements outside. Every few seconds, the massive mother bear lunged at the trunk again, a paw slamming into the wood with bone-jarring force, sharp claws gouging deep ruts. Her furious snarls filled the fading daylight, a primal warning Daniel couldn't mistake. You are not safe. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cool air. He wiped it away with a trembling hand, knowing he couldn't stay like this forever. Already, his throat was dry. He fumbled for the battered water bottle clipped to his belt, unscrewed the cap with shaking fingers, and took a small sip, rationing it carefully. When he looked down, his heart sank. Less than a quarter full, and that had to last however long he remained trapped. Hours, maybe longer. Worse when he reached for his camera. Once his lifeline to the outside world, the weight in his hands told him everything he needed to know. It was ruined. The lens cracked, the body battered. No way to call for help. No way to even document what might be the final chapter of his life. Outside, the light continued to shift, shadows growing longer, colder. Daniel knew what that meant. Night would soon fall, and with it, the temperature would plummet. Springtime in Clearwater National Park was deceptive. The days might be crisp and alive with promise, but the nights were brutal. Shivering already at the thought, Daniel tucked his arms close to his chest and tried to focus his mind. He thought back to the warnings he had once brushed off so casually, sitting in the ranger station's cozy office weeks earlier. An old park ranger with weather-beaten skin and solemn eyes had leaned across the desk and said, "In early spring, you don't mess with a bear, especially not a mother with cubs. They'll go through fire to protect them." Daniel had nodded politely, even made a mental note. But he hadn't felt it then. He hadn't believed it. Arrogance had brought him here. The same arrogance that made him believe he could outsmart nature with a lens and a little stealth. Now, nature was reminding him, with terrifying clarity, just how small he really was. He shifted uncomfortably, wincing as a shard of bark dug into his side. His ankle pulsed with heat, likely swelling beyond the boot's restraint. The pain, though bad, wasn't the real threat. It was time. Time was the enemy now, dragging him toward dehydration, toward hypothermia, toward the slow, creeping fingers of death. He stared out through the narrow slit at the front of the hollow trunk, just wide enough to glimpse flashes of the clearing. At first, it was just the bear, pacing, huffing, circling the tree like a dark, angry storm cloud. But then, movement. Daniel's stomach dropped. In the gray, trembling edge of his vision, slinking shapes emerged from the shadows, low to the ground, eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. Wolves. A pack, drawn by the noise and the smell of potential blood. Daniel swallowed hard, fear flooding his chest anew. It wasn't enough that the bear wanted him dead. Now opportunistic predators circled the fringes, eager to capitalize on any weakness. Hunger gleamed in their eyes, tongues flicking out between sharp teeth. A sick sort of realization dawned on him. Even if the bear gave up, he might still not make it out alive. The hollow tree that kept him safe from one predator might become his coffin before sunrise. Inside the tight darkness, Daniel pressed his forehead against the cool bark and closed his eyes. His mind raced, desperate for any plan, any escape. He had two choices: stay hidden, risk dehydration, hypothermia, and a slow death, or take the chance, however slim, and run. It was suicidal, maybe. His ankle was weak, the terrain unfamiliar. The bear was still outside, and now the wolves were gathering. But doing nothing guaranteed death. At sunset, he decided grimly, "I make my move." The temperature would start dropping fast then, and darkness would offer some cover. If he hesitated, cold and fear would finish the job nature had started. He checked his small folding knife, barely more than a glorified letter opener, and tucked it into his belt. Not much use against a bear or wolves, but maybe enough to buy a few seconds if it came to it. Counting his breaths, he steeled himself. 1 hour. That was all he needed. 1 hour of courage. He watched the sun dip lower, a molten orange sinking behind the jagged tree line. Shadows stretched long fingers across the clearing. The bear's pacing slowed, as if sensing the shift in the air. The wolves hung back, cautious, waiting for weakness. Daniel flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulders, ignoring the pain flaring through his ankle. He would need to be fast, silent, determined. There would be no second chances. His muscles tensed, coiling like springs. 10 more minutes. 5. 3. The first stars blinked awake in the darkening sky. Daniel whispered a silent prayer to no one in particular, adrenaline surging through his veins. On 3, he told himself. 1. 2. And then, piercing the evening air, a new sound froze him in place. Soft, desperate, heart-wrenching. The cries of cubs, very close, closer than they had been before. Daniel's blood turned to ice. The cubs, the very reason the mother bear was so relentless, had moved closer to his hiding spot. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of confusion. Their innocent whimpers carried through the still air, cutting through his resolve like a knife. His breath hitched. The mother bear would never leave now. If he moved, even an inch, it wouldn't just be an angry bear hunting him. It would be a mother convinced her babies were in mortal danger. Daniel pressed his hand against the rough bark, heart hammering in his ears. Running now meant certain death. Staying meant slow death. For the first time since the nightmare began, true despair crept in. Outside, the mother bear turned her massive head toward the tree, ears perked, nostrils flaring. She had heard the cubs, too, and she was coming. The tree trunk shuddered violently under the next blow, raining a fresh shower of splinters and dust into Daniel's eyes. He squeezed them shut, coughing as he hugged himself tighter against the rough, vibrating wood. Outside, the mother bear's fury had escalated to a fever pitch. The sound of her cubs' cries had sent her into a blind, protective rage. No longer content to wait him out, she was determined to tear the hollow apart with brute force if necessary. Every slam of her paws shook the tree. Every guttural roar filled the air with primal terror. Daniel pressed his palm against the inside of the trunk. He could feel the wood weakening. It wouldn't last much longer, and if it collapsed, he wouldn't have time to run. He would be exposed, injured, and defenseless before the bear's wrath. Another earth-shaking impact, and the hollow cracked somewhere near the base. This is it, he thought. Either I move, or I die. Then, a moment, a shift. The bear, pausing mid-attack, turned toward the sound of her cubs whimpering nearby. Instinct overrode rage for a heartbeat. She stepped slightly away from the trunk, massive head swinging side to side, checking on her babies. Daniel didn't hesitate. With a burst of desperate energy, he lunged forward, forcing his battered body through the narrow opening of the hollow. Pain lanced up his injured ankle as he hit the ground, but he ignored it, dragging himself to his feet. Instead of heading back toward the trail, a path the bear could easily overtake him on, Daniel made a split-second decision. He turned uphill. Earlier, while scouting the area, he had spotted a rocky cliff to the north. Steep, jagged terrain that might slow the bear down. If he could reach it, he might have a slim chance of survival. Each step was agony. His ankle screamed in protest, every movement a jolt of fire up his leg. His lungs burned, his vision blurred at the edges. Behind him, a furious roar split the twilight. He didn't look back. Branches tore at his face and arms as he pushed through the undergrowth. The incline grew steeper, loose stones rolling underfoot. He stumbled, catching himself against a tree, forcing his legs to keep moving. Another roar. Closer this time. The bear was giving chase. She thundered after him, an unstoppable force of nature, crashing through the forest with terrifying speed. Every heartbeat brought her closer. Every step Daniel took felt slower, heavier, more hopeless. The rocky slope loomed ahead, closer now, but still so far. Daniel gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Just a few more steps, he told himself. Just a few more. Then, a new sound. Mechanical. Alien. The roar of an engine shattered the forest's ancient stillness. Daniel's head snapped up in disbelief. An ATV, headlights glaring through the trees, came barreling toward him. On it, a park ranger, a rifle slung across his back, eyes wide with urgency. The mother bear skidded to a halt, startled by the unfamiliar noise and flashing lights. She reared up, towering high, snarling in confusion and alarm. For a long, breathless moment, Daniel thought she might attack anyway. But instinct won. With a final huffing roar, she dropped to all fours and backed away, circling protectively around her cubs who peered at her with wide, trusting eyes. Daniel stumbled forward, every ounce of strength spent, and collapsed into the ranger's arms. "Got you!" the ranger barked, dragging him onto the back of the ATV with practiced speed. "Hold on!" Daniel barely managed to clutch the rear frame before the ranger gunned the engine, spinning the vehicle around and tearing back toward the ranger station. Wind whipped Daniel's face as they sped through the darkening forest. He risked one glance over his shoulder. The mother bear stood with her cubs gathered tightly at her feet, massive head swinging slowly from side to side as she watched them flee. There was no triumph in her posture, only vigilance, only a mother's exhausted relief that her babies were safe. Daniel felt an unexpected lump rise in his throat. The bear wasn't a villain. She was a mother, a protector, and he had been the one to violate the unspoken rules of her world. Back at the ranger station, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Daniel sat slumped in a chair, a blanket around his shoulders. A medic was bandaging his ankle while the ranger filled out a report nearby. Daniel hardly heard them. He stared at his battered camera resting on the table. When the ranger had retrieved it from Daniel's belt, Daniel hadn't held out much hope. The body was cracked. The lens was shattered. But miraculously the SD card had survived. He hesitated for a long moment before sliding it into the station's old laptop. The folder opened. Hundreds of photos filled the screen. Shots of the cubs playing, drinking from the creek, nuzzling each other. And then he found it. One image, frozen forever in a single frame. The cubs, wide-eyed, their small bodies pressed close together, and behind them, emerging from the shadows like some ancient guardian of the woods, the massive silhouette of the mother bear, her eyes locked directly onto Daniel's lens. Seconds before everything went wrong. Daniel sat back staring at the screen, emotions crashing over him like waves. Awe, fear, regret, respect. He realized then that he had nearly paid the ultimate price for a single mistake, for forgetting the first rule of the wild. Respect it. Never underestimate it. The forest was not a place to conquer. It was a place to witness, to honor, to tread lightly upon. And though he had survived, he would never forget the lesson the bear had burned into his soul. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and somewhere, deep in the forest, a mother bear gathered her cubs close under the stars, safe once more in the only world they had ever known.